We have to acknowledge that public schools have their challenges. There are legitimate problems to be solved, but we're asked to believe that introducing more profiteering off our children will somehow result in less corruption and better quality.
A week and a half ago, school choice passed. School choice, quote unquote, passed, and that's been celebrated by Americans for Prosperity, which that's, if Americans for Prosperity is celebrating it, it's terrible. And the Retirement Systems of Alabama has criticized the voucher-like system. So, in the wake of this, I'm interested in, you said that you had some other thoughts on education in the state. So what are you thinking as we move further out from the passage of the quote-unquote school choice bill and closer to its actual implementation?
Right. Yeah, and I did want to highlight that the support by the Americans for Prosperity, which is one of these, shadowy billionaire-backed groups. I believe the Koch family is who funds them, if I'm not mistaken. But the Retirement System of Alabama coming out and criticizing this new law, I think, is important. A lot of educators really pay attention when Dr. David Bronner speaks, as he's the CEO of RSA, has been a long-time successful CEO of the retirement system. So, I think that's worth noting. There's concerns that, the more you weaken the public school system, ultimately that trickles into the pension system. And the state's pension system is very successful. It's actually kind of a success story here in Alabama. The fact that public employees have maintained a defined benefit pension, that the pension system is financially stable. So, keep your eyes on that for sure. But I did want to think about kind of moving forward and just put some alternative ideas out there that I think are missing from this conversation about school choice. Public schools are the cornerstone of a community, and they're critical to a democratic society. In this, the wealthiest country in the history of the world, an excellent public education for all should be a fundamental right. And yet, across the country and right here in Alabama, public education is under attack. We're seeing bills that target educators and their ability to teach truthfully, and while also pushing offensive, ridiculous narratives about what's happening inside public school classrooms. Essential values of diversity, equity, and inclusion are being banned, while LGBTQ folks are being demonized. Public schools are charged to do right by every child, regardless of their background, but too many of Alabama's legislators are determined to sabotage this mission. While trafficking in fake news and stoking divisive cultural resentment, Governor Kay Ivey and the Alabama Republican leadership are also celebrating passage of the CHOOSE Act, their latest voucher scheme to be adopted by Alabama that will funnel public school dollars into private pockets. Hundreds of millions of education funding will be spent subsidizing the choice of private and homeschooling for some families through education savings accounts, or ESAs. While the Education Trust Fund did not grow enough to cut the grocery tax another cent to help poor and working folks here in the state, legislators determined it grew enough to fund the CHOOSE Act.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
With public schools at the center of raging culture wars and the political push for school choice escalating since the pandemic, the Republican leadership in Montgomery decided to ram through this additional layer of school privatization regardless of public input. And sadly, the defenders of public education were not strong enough to stop it. Thank you to Alabama Rise for speaking up for public schools even when it wasn't necessarily popular among some groups in Montgomery. A statewide nonprofit coalition fighting poverty at the public policy level, Arise was the only group to testify in opposition during the committee hearing. And thank you to the American Federation of Teachers, AFT, whose national president, Randy Weingarten, held a press conference in opposition in Birmingham. I hope that public school educators and allies will remember who fought the good fight. This push for school choice is about putting public money into private pockets while pushing reactionary, segregationist ideology, all the while preying on dissatisfaction with the public schools that are sabotaged by these same forces. Most of it is financed by a handful of billionaires. And the results of these experiments are unsurprisingly harmful for students, educators, families, and communities. School choice is not about what's best for the kids or the public. We have to acknowledge that public schools have their challenges, their flaws, and their inequities. We know there are legitimate problems to be solved. But the solutions won't come from the very same corporate and reactionary forces who've played a major role in causing these problems. We're asked to believe that introducing more profiteering off our children will somehow result in less corruption and better quality. But the evidence, of course, says otherwise. The alternative is that we demand great public schools for every child and every family in every community. It's not just about your family or my family. It's about the public as a whole. If our state were serious about public education for all its children, educators would be empowered to create the kinds of public schools our communities deserve. Ultimately, to win justice for their students, educators have to have a seat at the table because their working conditions are the students' learning conditions. And that is why public school employees deserve the same legal rights as other workers in the private sector. Not just the right to a union, but also the right to collective bargaining, the right to representation, and the right to collectively withhold their labor. When educators organize in their workplaces to build power on the job, when educators organize in their communities to build strong coalitions, when educators organize at the ballot box to elect pro-education candidates, then we can begin to achieve the public schools Alabama students deserve. From parental leave to child care, universal school meals to universal pre-K, class size limits to after-school programs, there's so much more progress to be made. And only when we come together and fight for it will it happen. Educators, parents, students, and communities must unite to defend the teaching profession, the resources our schools rely on, and ultimately the very concept of public education.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.